Kyle stood with his champagne glass raised, 20 faces turned toward him. To Glenn, he said, a loser who got lucky. My mom settled because she was tired. A few nervous laps. Then silence. Diane's hand froze on her wine glass. She said nothing. I watched my stepson, held his gaze with steady gray-blue eyes. The co-signed car loan, the job I arranged, the apartment I own. I smiled, slow, small, he had no idea. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe and comment what time it is where you are. Your support means everything. My name is Glenn Mercer. I'm 54 years old, and I own more than anyone in that dining room will ever know. My father ran a lathe at the Decker machine works in Toledo for 31 years. I'd visit him after school, watch him shape raw steel into precision parts. The lathe screamed, oil and steel in the air. Metal shavings curled onto the floor like silver ribbons. He died with $847,000 in savings, a paid-off house, and a 1994 Buick with 62,000 miles on it. Real wealth is built in silence, he told me once, wiping grease from his hands. $1 at a time. The man bragging about money doesn't have any. I listened. After college, I took a project manager position at a manufacturing firm in Columbus. Entry level, $38,000 a year. My coworkers ordered lunch from the bistro across the street. I ate a sandwich from home at my desk. Same thing every day. Turkey, mustard, wheat bread. $1.40 per sandwich. $364 per year in savings. They talked about boats and vacations. I talked about nothing. Every month, I put money aside. When my father passed, he left me a portion of his savings, enough for a down payment. When I turned 29, I bought my first rental property, a duplex on the east side, $45,000 cash. I did the repairs myself on weekends. Found tenants, collected rent, bought another property 2 years later. By 46, I owned 12 units across Columbus. Combined value, $2.3 million. Monthly rental income, $14,400. I also had $890,000 in investment accounts, accumulated through 3 decades of living below my means. Net worth, approximately $3.2 million. I still drove a Honda Accord, still ate lunch at my desk, still said nothing. I met Diane at a community fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. She was 44, divorced, working as an office administrator, raising a teenage son alone. Her ex-husband had left her with debt and bad credit. She wore a dress that was clearly her nicest. She stood too close when she talked, touched my arm twice. I noticed. She looked at me, gray-blue eyes looking back at her, receding hairline, nothing special, and laughed too loud at my quiet jokes. We married within a year. I never told her about the properties, never mentioned the investment accounts. I wanted to know if she could love me as a man, not a balance sheet. The machinist's son in a modest house, the project manager with the old car. It was a test. I know that now. Kyle was 16 when I entered his life. His father, Rick, had left 4 years earlier, and Kyle still talked about him like a hero. The adventurer, the risk-taker, the real man. I was none of those things. I was the guy who showed up for dinner, who fixed the leaky faucet, who sat in the corner at Kyle's graduation party while his friends ignored me. I watched him flounder after college. No direction, no discipline, Applications rejected. Interviews bombed. Diane worried. Kyle blamed everyone but himself. Wade Prescott and I had done business for 15 years. I'd invested in his company's early expansion. He owed me nothing, but he remembered. "There's a young man who needs a chance," I told him. "My stepson. He's rough around the edges, but he might surprise you." Wade hired Kyle the following month. Sales position, $52,000 base plus commission. Kyle came home that night and announced he'd landed the job on his own. "Charm and hustle," he said. "The art of the close." Diane beamed. I said nothing. A year later, Kyle wanted a car. A Toyota Camry, $32,000. The dealership rejected his loan application. Credit history too thin, income too new. Diane called me at work. "He's so embarrassed," she said. "Is there anything you can do?" I drove to First Midwest Credit Union that afternoon, signed as guarantor on Kyle's auto loan. Diane handled the paperwork with Kyle, never mentioned my name. Kyle posted photos of the Camry on Instagram that weekend. #blessed, #self-made. When Kyle needed an apartment, I was ready. I'd purchased the building at 412 High Street 7 years earlier, knowing Diane's son would eventually need a place. 12 units, market rate, $2,100 for a one-bedroom. Kyle pays $1,400. He thinks he got lucky with rent control. He's never looked up market rates in his own building, never wondered why his rent stayed frozen while everywhere else in the city climbed, never asked who owned the building. The answer, printed on every lease in Patricia Langley's files: Mercer Properties, LLC, Glenn Mercer, sole owner. For 8 years, I supported Kyle without his knowledge. Job, car, apartment, safety nets he never saw, never acknowledged, never knew existed. I wanted to be valued as a man, a presence in their lives, a person worth respecting. Kyle just gave me his answer. 20 witnesses heard it. Kyle was 12 when his father left, old enough to remember Rick Fenton as a hero, young enough to need someone to blame. I know this because Diane told me over the years, bit by bit. Rick packed a single bag, kissed Kyle on the forehead, promised to call every week. The calls came for 2 months, then stopped. Kyle waited by the phone for 6 more. When I entered their lives 4 years later, Kyle looked at me the way a dog looks at a replacement owner. Not with hatred, with something worse. He looked through me, not at me. I was 46, gray at the temples, a project manager who drove a Honda Accord with 90,000 miles and ate a turkey sandwich at his desk every day. Kyle's father had been a sales rep who drove a Mustang and told stories about Vegas weekends. The comparison was immediate and permanent. The first family dinner set the pattern. Kyle sat across from me, pushing food around his plate. "So you manage projects," he said. "Not a question. That's right. Like spreadsheets and stuff, among other things." He looked at his mother. "Dad used to close $1-million deals." Diane changed the subject. I noted the exchange, filed it away. Eye rolls when I offered advice, snorts when I mentioned work. He started calling me the project manager in conversations with his friends, as if I didn't have a name. "Glenn's just a project manager," I overheard him tell a girlfriend at 19. My dad was actually successful. I said nothing. His father had left his mother with $40,000 in credit card debt and a mortgage 3 months behind. Success meant different things to different people. At 22, Kyle graduated and moved back home. No job prospects, no plan. He spent most days on the couch, scrolling through his phone, talking about opportunities that never materialized. "He's finding himself," Diane said when I raised concerns. "He's been through so much." She said it again when he missed my birthday. Again when he borrowed $300 and never mentioned it. Again when he told his friends I was just the guy who paid the mortgage. I got him the job at Wade's company. I co-signed his car loan. I made sure his apartment was affordable. He never knew. That was the point. His Instagram account appeared around his 25th birthday. I found it 6 months later, scrolling through Diane's phone while she showered. She followed him. I didn't. 12,000 followers watching Kyle Fenton live his best life. The downtown apartment with exposed brick. The Toyota Camry gleaming in golden hour light. Restaurant meals, gym selfies, motivational captions about hustle and self-reliance. Hashtag self-made. Hashtag blessed. Hashtag earning it. The apartment I owned. The car I guaranteed. The job I arranged. Every post built on foundations I'd laid. Every caption a lie he believed. The group chat screenshots arrived before the birthday dinner. Someone forwarded them to me from an anonymous email. A former friend of Kyle's, maybe. Someone who wanted me to know. Or someone who wanted Kyle to pay. The sender didn't matter. The content did. I read them in my workshop. Sawdust settling around me. The smell of cut pine sharp in the air. "Glenn is literally my mom's boring ATM," Kyle had written. "She married the human NPC so she wouldn't have to work." Responses flooded below. Laughing emojis. Agreement. "Do an impression again," someone requested. Kyle had sent a voice memo. I pressed play. My own voice came back at me. Flattened? Mocked? Kyle had recorded me at some family dinner, then played it for his friends with commentary. "This is Glenn giving life advice," Kyle narrated. "Watch how exciting this gets." My voice droned on about compound interest. Kyle's friends howled in the background. I set down my phone, looked at the half-finished cabinet on my workbench. 7 mechanisms in my mind now. 7 years of marriage. I'd been collecting data without realizing it. Every eye roll, every snide comment, every deflection from Diane. "You know how he gets," she'd say. "He doesn't mean it. He's been through so much." Never once, Kyle. That's enough. Never once. Don't talk about my husband that way. The birthday dinner wasn't an anomaly. It was Kyle finally saying aloud, in front of witnesses, what he'd been saying in private for years. 20 guests heard him call me a loser. They just didn't know what they were really hearing. Kyle set down his champagne glass. The room stayed silent. 20 faces looked anywhere but at me. Diane's wedding china covered the table. White porcelain with gold trim, used twice a year at most. Candles burned in the silver holders her mother had given us. The 3-tier cake sat at the center, 54 written in pink frosting. I sat at the head of the table in my navy button-down, hands still on the table. Diane's sister Tara was to my left, 3 seats down. Neighbors filled the middle section. Book club friends clustered near Diane at the opposite end. The word still hung in the air. A real man. Took risks. Mom settled. Nervous laughter had rippled through the room moments ago. 2 guests had exchanged glances. Someone coughed. Now, nothing. I looked at Diane. Her hand remained frozen on her wineglass. Her eyes dropped to the table. She said nothing. The silence stretched. Someone's fork scraped porcelain. A chair creaked. 10 seconds of nothing. Tara stared at her sister with an expression I recognized. The look you give someone when you expect them to speak and they don't. When their silence says more than words could. I turned back to Kyle. He stood there with his champagne raised, still waiting for someone to laugh along with him. I kept my hands still on the table. Thank you for your honesty, Kyle. It's clarifying. I set my napkin down and pushed back my chair. The legs scraped against the hardwood. Excuse me, I said to no one in particular. I walked through the kitchen. Through the window, I caught Diane's silhouette at the table, still motionless. Guests shifting in their chairs. I kept walking. Out the back door, across the yard to the detached garage. The workshop door opened with its familiar creak. Inside, the smell of sawdust and linseed oil. Sawdust crunched under my shoes, cooler here than the dining room by 10 degrees. My hand tools hung on the pegboard wall, each in its designated spot. The vintage radio sat silent on the shelf. I pulled the cord on the overhead light. The workbench came into view. The 7-movement puzzle box sat where I'd left it. Walnut and maple. Each mechanism represented a year of my marriage. The interior remained empty, waiting for a decision I hadn't made yet. I picked up my phone. The first call went to Wade Prescott. He answered on the second ring. Wade, this is Glenn Mercer. I need to discuss some changes regarding Kyle's position. Wade listened. He didn't interrupt. I understand, he said when I finished. I've been documenting performance issues for months. This just confirms what I suspected. The second call went to Patricia Langley. Patricia, this is Glenn Mercer. I need a 72-hour notice to vacate prepared for Unit 304 at 412 High Street. I can have it ready by morning. Standard lease termination clause? Yes. The third call went to First Midwest Credit Union. I got voicemail, left a message. This is Glenn Mercer regarding the auto loan I guaranteed for Kyle Fenton. I'm withdrawing my guarantee effective immediately. Please contact my attorney to proceed. I ended the call and set the phone on the workbench. The puzzle box sat beside it. The dining room held 20 witnesses. They saw Kyle call me a loser. They saw Diane say nothing. They saw me leave with dignity. The 7 mechanisms clicked into place. Decision made. My home office held years of evidence. A converted bedroom, 8 feet by 10. A desk against the window. A filing cabinet in the corner. My father's photograph on the wall, black and white, taken at the Toledo machine shop in 1987. He stood beside his lathe with oil-stained hands and a half smile. I pulled open the top drawer. Alphabetized folders. Color-coded tabs. Everything in its place. The auto loan documents sat in a manila folder labeled Fenton Kyle Financial. I spread them across the desk. First Midwest Credit Union. Consumer Auto Loan Agreement. Principal amount, $32,000. Term, 60 months. Interest rate, 6.9%. Page 3 showed 2 signatures. Kyle's scrawl at the top. Below it, in the guarantor section, my name, Glenn T. Mercer, dated 3 years ago. I set the loan papers aside and reached for the next folder. The employment recommendation letter was a single page. Prescott Automotive Distribution letterhead would have been more formal, but Wade had asked me to write it myself. Personal touch, he said. Dear Wade, I'm writing to recommend Kyle Fenton for the sales position we discussed. He's rough around the edges, but I believe he has potential. I'm asking you to give him a chance as a personal favor to me. I'll consider it a debt repaid. Regards, Glenn Wade had hired Kyle the following month. Kyle had never seen this letter. Never would have believed it existed. I moved to the laptop. The Mercer Properties LLC folder contained scanned copies of every deed, every lease, every property management agreement. I clicked through to 412 High Street. Purchase date, 7 years ago. Purchase price, $890,000. Current assessed value, $1.2 million. 12 units. Market rent for a one-bedroom, $2,100. Unit 304, Kyle Fenton. Monthly rent, $1,400. I printed the ownership document. The paper was still warm. I added it to the stack. The cabinet's bottom drawer held older files. Correspondence, tax records from the previous decade. And buried at the back, a folder I hadn't opened in 2 years. Fenton, Rick, personal. Inside was a printed email. I remembered receiving it on a Tuesday evening, sitting in the same chair. The subject line, need to talk. Glenn, I know we've never been close, but I'm in a bad spot. Some guys I owe money to in Reno are making threats. Real threats. I need $15,000 to make this go away. I wouldn't ask if I had any other options. I know what you think of me. Maybe you're right, but Diane would want you to help. For Kyle's sake, if nothing else. Rick, I read the email again. Rick Fenton, the adventurer, the risk taker. The real man Kyle still worshipped. A gambling addict in a Reno apartment, begging the project manager for money. I had wired $15,000 to Rick's account the following morning. Diane never knew. Kyle never knew. Rick never acknowledged the transfer. No thank you, no follow-up, nothing. For 2 years, that email sat in my filing cabinet while Kyle mocked me at family dinners. While he told his friends I was his mother's boring ATM. While he built an Instagram following on foundations I'd laid. I printed the email and placed it on top of the stack. The Manila folder held 4 documents now. Loan papers, recommendation letter, property records, Rick's email, 4 pieces of paper. Enough. 3 calls completed. 3 confirmations. By Monday, Kyle's job, apartment, and car would be gone. I closed the Manila folder and set it on my desk. On the wall, my father looked down from his photograph. 31 years at the lathe. $847,000 in savings. A paid-off house. A 1994 Buick. Real wealth is built in silence. So is justice. Monday morning, Kyle walked into Prescott Automotive at 8047. I know this because Wade texted me the moment Kyle's car pulled into the lot. He's here, confident as ever. I was in my workshop, coffee cooling beside the puzzle box. I set the mug down and waited. Wade's second text came 11 minutes later. Done. Security walked him out. He tried to argue about his numbers. I showed him the client complaints. 3 formal ones, this quarter alone. He went quiet after that. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. At 9:23, my phone buzzed again. Patricia Langley this time. Notice posted at 412 High Street, Unit 304. Per your instructions. I opened the security app for the building. The camera in the hallway showed Patricia walking away from Kyle's door. The notice was visible even on the small screen. White paper, black text, notice to vacate 72 hours. I switched to the exterior camera and waited. At 9:41, the Camry pulled into the lot. Kyle got out, still wearing his work clothes, the slim-fit suit he'd bought to impress clients. He walked toward the entrance, then stopped. I watched him read the notice. His hand reached up and touched the letterhead, Mercer Properties, LLC. His fingers moved down to the signature line. He stood there for a long time, not moving. Then he pulled the notice off the door and looked at it again, closer this time, making sure. His mouth moved. I couldn't hear what he said, but I didn't need to. The name at the bottom told him everything. Glenn Mercer, owner. His stepfather owned the building. I finished my coffee and went back to my workbench. The call from Diane came at 10,014. Glenn, her voice was thin. Kyle just called. He lost his job and there's some notice on his door and the bank called about his car. What's happening? Nothing's happening. He says you own his building. Is that true? Yes. Silence. I could hear her breathing. Glenn, please, whatever you're doing, you have to stop. I set down the chisel I'd been holding. I'm not doing anything, Diane. I'm simply stopping what I've been doing. There's a difference. What does that mean? It means I co-signed his car loan. I recommended him to Wade. I've been charging him $700 below market rent for 2 years. I'm not attacking Kyle. I'm withdrawing my support. More silence. Then, he didn't know. No, he didn't. Why didn't you tell him? I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I provide. She started to say something else. I ended the call. Kyle tried calling me twice that afternoon. I let both go to voicemail. The first message was angry. Glenn, what the hell is this? You own my building? You got me fired? Call me back right now. The second came an hour later. Quieter, almost confused. Glenn, I don't understand what's happening. Can we just talk? I deleted both. At 4,030, my phone showed a notification from the security system at 412 High Street. Motion detected at Unit 304. I opened the app and watched. Kyle sat on the steps outside his apartment building. His Camry was parked at the curb. First Midwest had given him until Wednesday to pay $18,000 or surrender the vehicle. The remaining balance, after 3 years of payments on the loan I'd guaranteed, he was still wearing his work clothes. The slim-fit suit looked different now. Like a costume from a play that had closed early, a silver Audi pulled up, Monica's car. She got out and walked toward him. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could read the body language. Kyle stood, gestured with his hands, explaining, justifying. Monica pulled out her phone, held it up so he could see his Instagram feed. She scrolled slowly. Months of posts, self-made, blessed, earning it. Kyle's shoulders dropped. He reached for her arm. She stepped back. Her mouth moved. I could count the words. You lied about everything. Who even are you? Then she turned and walked back to her car. Kyle stood rooted on the sidewalk. The Audi pulled away. He was still standing there when I closed the app. I looked at the puzzle box on my workbench. 7 mechanisms, 7 years. The interior still empty. My phone buzzed one more time. Text from Tara, Diane's sister. I heard what happened. I was there at the birthday dinner. I saw how he talked to you and how Diane said nothing. 3 of us talked about it in the parking lot afterward. I just want you to know, some of us noticed. I read it twice, then I went back to work on the box. Outside, somewhere across the city, Kyle sat in a car he wouldn't own by Wednesday, outside an apartment he had 72 hours to leave, without a job or a girlfriend or any of the stories he'd told himself about who he was. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. The first phase was complete. What came next depended on Diane. Through the workshop window, I saw Kyle's Camry pull into the driveway at 4047 the next afternoon. He got out, still wearing the suit from his terminated job, the car he wouldn't own by tomorrow. He walked toward the house. I turned back to the puzzle box. The workshop door banged open 3 minutes later. "Glenn?" I didn't look up. My hands kept working the mechanism. Second movement. Third. "Glenn, look at me." I set down the box and turned. Kyle stood in the doorway. Diane lingered behind him, hands twisting together. Her eyes moved between us like she was watching traffic from the median. "What did you do?" Kyle's voice cracked on the last word. I reached for the manila folder on the workbench. Held it out. "What is this?" "Open it." He grabbed the folder, flipped it open. The recommendation letter sat on top. I watched his eyes move across the page. Wade's name. My signature. Give him a chance as a personal favor. "This is..." He stopped. "Read it again. I asked Wade to hire you. 3 years ago, he did it because I invested in his company's early expansion." Kyle's jaw worked. No sound came out. He turned to the next document, the loan agreement. First Midwest Credit Union. His signature at the top, mine at the bottom. Guarantor. "The dealership rejected your application," I said. "Credit history too thin. Your mother asked if I could help. She knew?" I didn't answer. He already had the answer. The property records came next. Mercer Properties, LLC, 412 High Street, 12 units. My name on every deed. Kyle looked up. His face had gone gray. "You own my building." "Yes, you've owned it the whole time." 7 years. He stared at the documents, then at me, then at Diane. "Did you know about all of this?" Diane's mouth opened, closed. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Kyle turned back to the folder. One more page remained. He pulled it out. Rick Fenton's email. The subject line, "Need to talk." I watched him read it, watched his expression change. The confusion, then recognition, then something behind his eyes went dark. "Dad sent this 2 years ago. From Reno. He owed money to people who were making threats. He asked you for money. $15,000. Kyle's hand shook. The paper trembled. "I sent it," I said, "for your mother's sake. Your father never thanked me." The workshop went silent. Sawdust floated in the late afternoon light. The smell of linseed oil hung in the air. The vintage radio sat silent on the shelf. Kyle's voice came out a whisper. He said he was working on something big, a real estate deal. He said it was going to change everything. He was hiding from creditors in a 1-bedroom apartment. The email fell from Kyle's fingers, landed on the concrete floor. He turned to Diane. "Did you know?" She didn't look up. Her hands kept twisting together. The silence stretched. "Mom, I knew Glenn sent money," she said to the floor. "I didn't ask why." Kyle stood there. The folder hung open in his hands. 4 documents, 4 foundations of his entire identity: job, car, apartment, father. All of it built on a man he'd called a loser. I picked up the puzzle box, ran my thumb across the grain. "My father used to say something," I told him. "He said the measure of a man isn't what he builds. It's what he walks away from when walking away is the harder choice." Kyle's eyes met mine. Gray-blue, holding blue. No anger left in him now. Just empty. The stories he'd told himself about who he was, gone. "I don't know who I am," he said. I didn't answer. That wasn't my question to solve. He set the folder on my workbench, turned and walked past Diane without a word. She reached for his arm. He kept walking. The front door opened, closed. Through the workshop window, I watched him get into the Camry. He sat behind the wheel for a long time, not starting the engine, just sitting. Tara's car pulled up to the curb. Diane's sister arriving for dinner. She'd been at the birthday party, seen Kyle's toast, seen Diane's silence. Now she stood on the sidewalk and watched Kyle drive away. Her expression said what words couldn't. She'd witnessed both moments, the humiliation and the reckoning. The same audience, different ending. Diane appeared in the workshop doorway. "Glenn?" I turned back to the puzzle box. The 4th mechanism needed adjustment. "Glenn, please?" "Not tonight, Diane." She stood there for another moment. Then her footsteps retreated across the yard. I worked on the box until the light faded. 7 movements, 7 years. The interior still empty. The smell of sawdust and linseed oil settled around me as the last daylight disappeared through the window. Some decisions take time. If my story resonates with you, tap like and comment a rating from 1 to 10. Explain your score. I read them all. 6 months later, I set down the chisel and ran my thumb across the grain. Walnut and maple, 7 movements. 7 years of marriage, built into the wood. The final mechanism clicked into place. I'd spent 40 hours on this box since the birthday dinner. Now it sat finished on my bench, morning light catching the oil finish. The smell of walnut shavings hung in the air. I opened it. Each movement took time. Slide, turn, press, lift, rotate, press again, open. The interior waited, lined with velvet I'd cut from an old jewelry case. Empty. Good. My wedding ring caught the light, still on my finger. Diane had started therapy 3 weeks after Kyle left. I hadn't asked her to. She'd gone on her own, found someone who specialized in families, and kept going every Tuesday for 5 months. At Thanksgiving, her cousin Marcus asked what happened with Kyle. Old question, usually deflected. Diane set down her fork. "He disrespected my husband for years," she said, "and I let him." 14 people at that table went silent. Marcus changed the subject. Kyle's letter arrived last week, handwritten on plain paper. No envelope decoration, no excuses. Just acknowledgement. He'd sold the Camry, took the bus to work now. I read it twice in the workshop. He'd found work at a supply warehouse. Entry level, $42,000 a year. Less than half what I'd arranged for him at Wade's. A job he got through his own application, his own interview, his own merit. Not an apology, something harder. Recognition. I closed the empty box. The ring stayed where it was. Some things you walk toward,